Top 10 quarterback in next year's class is now off the board. Congratulations are in order for the Irish. We'll tell you what it means for Marcus Freeman and the future of Notre Dame. Plus, we are a quarter of the way through the college football season, and some teams have either helped or hurt themselves on the trail with their start. And Stanford and Washington definitely qualify, but we dig a little deeper on these two soon-to-be former Pac-12 programs. All that and more as the College Football Recruiting Show starts right now. Alongside Blair Angulo, I am Emily Proud. A reminder to submit your questions in the chat. The only way you can see said chat is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Also, please like this video so we know that you're watching. Blair, we got to start with some not so fun news. Michigan State has given Mel Tucker notice of intent to terminate his contract for cause. Now, Blair, it's always kind of a tricky situation. We've talked about this before. When you're trying to recruit, when you have that uncertainty at the head coaching position, but now that there is some finality to this and it's not going to drag on, how does that maybe help with recruiting?
Well, Emily, recruiting is pitching the future, right? You are trying to sell what the program can be, and it's hard to do that when you're answering the constant questions about that future. So for them to have some clarity, I think is going to help them move and turn the page and move forward as a program and as a recruiting staff.
Let's turn the page as a recruiting show and talks about some of the headlines in the world of recruiting. A lot of exciting things happening. Let's start with the Irish landing their quarterback of the future. 2025 four-star Deuce Knight announced his commitment to Notre Dame today. He picked him over Auburn, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. So who is the number 10 quarterback in next year's class?
A super talented lefty with a quick release. Our scouting department loves his balance and ability to extend plays with his legs. With Deuce headed to play for the Irish, the future in South Bend is very bright.
It certainly is. All right, our next one. They did it. We told you it could happen, and it officially has. Kentucky flipped twin brothers from Michigan. Four-star defensive lineman Jared Smith and his brother, four-star edge Jacob Smith. Now, the duo, they moved Mark Stoops' class inside the top 30. So, Blair, what does a win like this mean for, I'll be honest, a team that we don't talk about much on this show?
It's really important, obviously shows that Kentucky can go toe-to-toe with a college football playoff contender like Michigan on the recruiting trail. Kentucky has only signed 3 top 25 classes since Mark Stoops took over in 2012, but the Wildcats are certainly capable of being dangerous during flip season.
All right, sticking in the SEC East while we still can, Florida keeping the wins going. After a big one at home against Tennessee, Billy Napier followed it up by locking up 2025 four-star running back Waltez Clark. He is a Tampa native, and he was in the building for the win. But what kind of athlete will someday be helping the Gators get more wins like that?
A taller running back with great balance. He's got terrific burst and the ability to separate at the second level. I think his best trait, though, is his versatility. He can run, but he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. That's going to be an important aspect for him when he gets to Gainesville.
Whew, he's got some wheels. All right, we got more on the Gators' big weekend with Steve Wiltfong in just a bit, but one more big commitment following a big win. Mizzou beating rival Kansas State and then landing 2025 three-star defensive lineman Juju Marks. The Kansas native is now the first commitment for the Tigers 2025 class. But Blair, what do we need to know about him?
Well, he's 6'7" and 260 pounds, so you can't miss him on the football field. 6 other SEC schools had already offered Juju when he made the decision, so the Tigers have their work cut out for them to try to hold on to him, but a promising commitment this early in the 2025 cycle.
Time now for the Wiltfong Whip Around with our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, let's start with a huge win for Billy Napier down in the Swamp, an upset of then number 11 Tennessee. A bunch of targets in attendance to watch it happen, but one of the biggest was the number 8 defensive lineman in the class, L.J. McCray. What did he say about his visit?
Well, L.J. McCray, he loved his visit. You know, he said the performance from the Tennessee game definitely shows the direction the program is heading. They came out on top amongst all the doubt. Look, if you're a finalist for L.J. McCray, you want to get him to your game because Florida State got him there against LSU. They played great. They beat LSU. Miami got him there for the Texas A&M game. They played fantastic. They beat the Aggies. Florida gets them there for the Tennessee game. They play awesome. They get a huge win over the Vols. And this decision just keeps getting harder and harder for LJ McCray. Andrew Ivan spoke with him on Friday night, has a nice story about him potentially being a 5-star. He told Andrew Ivins he don't have a bad decision, a bad option. And he took his decision into the fall, Emily, so he could watch these teams play to get a feel for where their programs were at. And watching them play, I think is just making his decision harder and harder. I expect him to get back to Georgia for the Kentucky game. He wants to get back to Auburn and watch them play one more time. He has an upcoming official visit to Florida State in October. He wants to decide sometime in October. But if these teams keep playing well, he's going to have a hard time, Emily. And I talked to some staffers, some people that were in Gainesville inside the swamp on Saturday, and they said the crowd helped win that game. And a win like that certainly validates what Florida's been selling on the trail. But anytime you have an environment like that, you win a game of that magnitude, it helps. Recruiting's a game of inches. I think the Gators got some inches in LJ McCray's recruitment. They've always been one of his favorites. I've always had them at or near the top alongside Georgia, and they couldn't have had a better performance against one of their top remaining targets on campus in LJ McCray.
It was a big night inside the swamp for the class of 2025 as well, Steve. Antoine Hill and Ryan Montgomery were two big-time quarterbacks in attendance. 4-star safety DJ Pickett was also inside the stadium. What did these three top 24/7 talents think of when they took everything in inside the swamp?
Well, let's start with the quarterbacks. You obviously love that Florida has their franchise guy potentially in DJ Lagway in 2024. And now there's a standard in that room that they want to recruit that position at. And Antoine Hill and Ryan Montgomery, two top 247 signal callers, have emerged as their favorite guys at the position in this cycle. And with Ryan Montgomery, I think it's them in South Carolina in the best position for the Findlay, Ohio native. He was at South Carolina's opener against North Carolina. He's going to be back in Columbia to watch the Gators and Gamecocks play against each other. But he said the atmosphere was amazing inside the swamp. There's truly a different feel down in SEC country and in the swamp. Talked about it being a huge win. Talked about the way the offense played. He loved how in control and confident Graham Mertz was. Said Graham Mertz is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country, and said that Florida's only going up from here. And then A.J. Hill, Antoine Jr., he talked about how hard Florida fought to get the win. And he talked about the electric atmosphere there as well, said Florida's in the right direction. They executed their game plan. Now, he's got some upcoming visits. He's going to be at Auburn for the Georgia game. Colorado recently offered he's going to be out there for the USC game. He's going to go, he's going to go see them play against Stanford in October. And then Florida State, he's going to see them play or host Duke in October. And he wants to also get to South Carolina, that's Ryan Montgomery. My notes are running together here on both of these young men, but Florida made a great pitch with both these young men, got a big win. Graham Mertz looked good, and these guys are high on Florida moving forward with their process.
Certainly a huge weekend for Florida, a signature win for Billy Napier. Sounds like some more wins potentially could be coming on the recruiting trail. We have more programs to talk about, not just the Gators today, but before we get there, I got to ask for likes. So Steve, throw up the thumbs up. Go ahead, hit that like button. Steve, there we go. Okay, I was like, don't leave me hanging here. We got to ask for those likes. It is customary in this segment. Let's stick in the SEC East, though. Georgia had a few visitors this weekend for their game against South Carolina. The headliners in attendance were a couple 5-stars. Florida State safety commit KJ Bolden and another 5-star and defensive lineman Aiden Breland. What'd you hear from those two 5-stars?
Well, talking to people that spent time with Aiden Breland, they said he was all smiles. He's been to Georgia numerous times, and he's down to 3. Got Georgia, Miami, and Oregon in contention for the 5-star from Mater Dei, who chose to spend his bye week in Athens. And he loves the consistent production and development of defensive line. And when you talk to some people that spent time with him, they think he could ultimately end up at Georgia. Now, Miami and Oregon certainly going to get their say to try and say otherwise. And there's been a lot of talk about Oregon with Aiden Breland. But Georgia, there's some people that think they can ultimately win out. In Miami, we've seen them pull off some massive recruiting wins under Mario Cristobal and company, so you never discount them. And they've had Breland the campus a couple times. And there's been scenarios where I thought maybe they've led at times too. So that's one of the exciting ones to follow. And then KJ Bolden visited, got a chance to spend time with Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, Fran Brown. I talked to his dad. They had a good time on campus, getting around the staff again. Talked about it being a great atmosphere as usual. Now I still think it's an uphill climb to flip him from Florida State. He's looking to get back to campus for the Virginia Tech game. Looking to get back there for the Miami game. That's going to be his official visit. And so Florida State, I'm not predicting a flip there, but Georgia's going to keep hanging in there. And anytime you can get KJ Bolden to campus, that's massive.
An incredible recruitment I think we're going to be monitoring here for the next couple of months heading into the early signing period. Steve, you mentioned with Florida setting a standard at the quarterback position. Georgia has already set that standard. Jared Curtis was there as well. He's the number 2 overall prospect in the 2026 class. The Nashville native still has a long way to go until the pen meets paper. But after the visit, where does Georgia sit in his recruitment?
Yeah, even though it's his recruiting process is still getting off the ground, he recently put out a top 10, and I think Georgia's at or near the top there. He told me it's awesome in Athens. The fans live for it. Shows how much the program is loved. They recruit the best of the best. He wants to play with some of the best players in the country, and then he just feels the love when he gets around that coaching staff. I think you got Georgia. You got Alabama in a good spot, Florida State, certainly South Carolina, but Georgia getting a big win in front of Jared Curtis, who's been to campus a ton, really likes Coach Bobo and Coach Van Gorder. I think Georgia's in a great spot for Jared Curtis.
All right, speaking of quarterbacks, it's time now for our daily dose of Deion. The Buffs are 3-0 after an overtime win over Colorado State, and the number 1 QB in the 2025 class was there to take it all in. Bryce Underwood actually moved up his visit to take in this rivalry game, so what did he tell you about his experience in Boulder?
Well, I talked to his dad a little bit. It was real late. It was about 3:30 in the morning Eastern time when I heard from his dad via text message, and they loved the atmosphere. They thought it was electric. They loved the environment, and they got a chance to spend time with Coach Sanders and his staff. They saw Shadur Sanders throw for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns, including that 98-yard game-tying drive. So the offense checked. They're building relationships with the coaching staff. The fan support, the We Want Bryce Underwood sign out there caught Bryce's attention. Colorado, they're in the middle of this one. You know, they're battling LSU. They're battling Michigan. Penn State's trying to hang around in there. You got Alabama, Oregon, but Colorado certainly had him out there for a good weekend where he saw great offense and got a chance to get to know Coach Sanders and the staff better.
Colorado is battling. They're in the picture for a lot of players, including Alabama commit Jeremiah Beeman and 4-star offensive lineman Jordan Seaton. They also made it out to Boulder to take in the atmosphere. They're 2 big targets for Coach Prime. So where do things stand with them after this trip?
Well, Jordan Seaton had a great visit. He wants to get back for an official. This was an unofficial. He's got future trips coming up to Oklahoma, Florida, and Ohio State, with Oregon trying to battle in there. Alabama is the school he named as his favorite in the summer and then doubled down on that early this fall. But he loved the culture at Colorado. He started to connect with Danny O'Neil and some of those commits there, and he thinks this is a program that is going to contend for the college football playoff sooner rather than later, and he thinks he can help maintain that at Colorado. So we'll see if he gets back out there for an official visit, but he loved his time in Boulder. And then Jeremiah Beeman out of Birmingham Parker, longtime Alabama commit. He was out there with his trainer, Leonard Stevens. They enjoyed the ball game. They certainly enjoyed their time with Deion Sanders, and the energy and the message seemed to resonate. And it looks like Colorado's going to get him back to campus as well. And one thing that really stood out to me, one of the recruits on campus said that whether you were a 5-star, a 4-star, or a no-star, Deion Sanders and his staff treated you the same. And so I just think they've created an environment out there that recruits love to be in. And it resonated with guys like Jordan Seaton, Jeremiah Beeman, and Bryce Underwood.
All right, we mentioned earlier just how exciting the recruitment of KJ Bolden is going to be, to see how it plans out. I want to know about this one. 5-star wide receiver Ryan Wingo. He was back at Texas this weekend, and it kind of seems like the Longhorns are maybe gaining some momentum here. Steve, how did he enjoy his latest visit?
Well, his dad told me it was state of the art, first class. Ryan Wingo spoke with Horns 247's Hank South about the visit, raved about it. But just talking to the Wingo camp, I still think that Texas is the one to beat in this recruitment, from time spent with Coach Sarkisian to the offense to the way that the playmakers are schemed into big plays. There's a lot that Texas has going for them in this recruitment. Now, there was a chance that maybe he was going to commit during his visit. He's going to be at the Mizzou game this weekend. It's in St. Louis, 5 minutes down the road. They host Memphis in the Dome there. I expect him to get back to Mizzou one more time before announcing any kind of college decision as well. So while Texas is the leader in the clubhouse for Ryan Wingo, the tournament is not over. In Missouri, they are undefeated. They just got a big win. He's going to get a chance to watch Missouri play. Coach Peeler has that track record of developing receivers there. Going to get back for a visit. Coach Drinkwitz continues to be in major touch. And so while a lot of the momentum was really picking up for Texas going into this visit, since he's come out uncommitted, I think that you still can't sleep on Missouri here. And we'll see what the Tigers can do in front of Ryan Wingo and his family on Saturday.
This is going to be a fun one. Thank you, Steve. You can see previous episodes of the Wiltfong Whip Around right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. And while I've got you, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. You want to be a part of this channel if you are not already. So we have hit the end of the first quarter of the college football season, and half of you are happy with your team, half of you not so much. But here on the College Football Recruiting Show, we're all about recruiting implications. So here are 4 teams that we have picked who have either helped or hurt their efforts on the trail with their start to the season. So Blair, let's start here on a positive note with that first team. Florida State certainly helped themselves on the trail with a 3-0 start and a number 4 ranking. But what have you seen from the Noles that has not only made them a potential title contender, but also appealing to some of the top prospects this cycle?
Emily, from a visibility standpoint, they really had the stage early on, right? That first weekend of college football. They play on a Sunday. What's every recruit doing on a Sunday? Not doing their homework. They're watching the Florida State LSU game. They were able to beat that number 5 ranked LSU team on Sunday. And a lot of recruits, I think, were impressed with what they saw. This is Mike Norvell's 4th year now, so he has his own recruits in Tallahassee. He has his own roster already, and I think given the noise that we had heard in the state of Florida from the likes of Miami, from the likes of Florida with new head coaches, it was really important for Florida State to come out of the gate really hot. And I think it validated what some players, what some recruits were able to do from a decision-making standpoint over the offseason. KJ Bolden, right, committed to Florida State over the likes of Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. Several others are still trying to flip him. Manasseh Tete flipped from USC. These are players that I think needed to see that Florida State is potentially back, and now they are inside the top 35 nationally in terms of yards per game, so they're attractive on offense. They're also top 7 in scoring per game. This is now, I think, a team that can really ascend not only on the field but in the recruiting rankings as they continue to pitch and push for the trajectory of what this program is headed.
Yeah, definitely a sleeping giant for the last few years, but it's good to see them do it on the trail because it's been a lot of portal lately, and so to have that all come together, it's dangerous. It's going to be an exciting game this Saturday, too, against Clemson. Let's go. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Alabama is a team that you've said has potentially hurt themselves on the trail. I mean, if you look at their top 5 2024 class, you still see a lot of stars, obviously a lot of wins left on the schedule here, but what about their early season performance has them taking hits on the trail?
Well, I was very hesitant to send out this text message to our producer who asked me who had hurt themselves. This is Alabama. They're still going to recruit at a high level. They're still going to win a lot of football games. But for the first time since I think it was 2015, they have fallen outside the top 10 in the Associated Press poll. And I think that has hurt Alabama in the eye of the recruit. I think, they are able to really attract talent from coast to coast, as evidenced by West Coast commits like Julian Sain, the 5-star quarterback from California, as well as Xavier Brown, the big-time corner from California. But that loss to Texas at home and what they showed this past week really struggling against South Florida, especially on offense, I think should be cause for concern. There should be some alarms ringing, not only in Tuscaloosa, but I think throughout SEC country, because I think a lot of coaches are going to start to see some blood in the water and wonder, okay, could we take advantage of this? And I think that's what's hurting Alabama is the perception of maybe this program taking a step back and not being what it has been in the past.
That whole conversation was just insane, but obviously, a step back is still not that far down the road. And on the positive side, recruits could potentially look at this as an opportunity, especially on the offensive side of the ball, to play early. Let's go to the flip side, though. Texas has certainly been helped by that win over Alabama. So what has stood out to you from the Longhorns through the first quarter of the season?
For me, it's defense, Emily. I think we munch on this quite a bit, right? We always talk about Texas needing to recruit on the defensive side of the ball. Well, right now they have a top 25 defense in terms of yards per game. They also have a top 30 defense nationally in terms of points allowed. These are steps forward for a unit that really needed to make strides in order for this program, for this team, for this essentially this school to be back, as a lot of fans want them to be back. So if you're a player like Colin Simmons, right, one of those big time defensive prospects that announced his commitment to the Longhorns during the offseason, you look at that as another positive step, and I think they've really helped themselves. Obviously, they are now the favorites to win the Big 12. They almost stumbled this past week, but they were obviously able to win that game. But I think for them to be able to do what they did at Alabama and to continue to ascend, I think has been really helpful, and I think recruits are taking notice.
Yeah, you heard Steve Wiltfong just a few minutes ago talk about how they're really in the running for Ryan Wingo, and that is the recruitment that has been really heating up lately. Okay, nobody was really sure what to make of Kenny Dillingham's first season at Arizona State. They got that win week 1, but have dropped 2 since. It's definitely rebuild mode, I'll call it, especially with the self-imposed bowl ban. But progress always helps on the trail, as long as you're seeing that, even in year 1. So what has you worried, though, 3 games in?
I think it's the turnout at Sun Devil Stadium. I don't know if you were able to catch some of the pictures that were coming out late in Saturday night's loss to Fresno State, but the stadium was empty, and that's a huge red flag for a program that is under a new head coach that has been trying to rise up interest and to try to get more fans into that stadium, and that's unfortunate because they are dealing with injuries. I think they're playing their 5th string quarterback already. They had a number of turnovers. They were shut out at home against a group of 5 opponent in Fresno State. So that's not a good sign either, especially for a coach that has been, in a way, really pitching his offensive mindset and pitching the ability to bring in playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. I think recruits are looking at it and wondering, okay, what's going to happen if I go there? They announced that self-imposed postseason ban before the season, so I don't know how motivated the current roster is, and that's going to affect, I think, what recruits look at them in terms of an appeal standpoint. Then you look at what Arizona's doing down the road, landing the likes of Elijah Rushing, flipping Damon Williams from Ole Miss, the big-time quarterback there from their own backyard. I think these 2 programs could be headed in opposite directions from a recruiting standpoint. So not a great start for the Big 12-bound Sun Devils. A few other West Coast schools are going in opposite directions. I'm talking Stanford. I'm talking Washington. To discuss that, we're bringing in national recruiting editor Brandon Huffman and to kind of touch on what Stanford has done, what Washington has done. And Huff, let's start with the Cardinal. They are right now a program that's wounded, a program that hasn't really been doing things on the field. They had made a huge jump in recruiting. They currently have a top 25 class. But when you think about what they've done on the field, losing to Sacramento State this past weekend, how do you assess what they could be potentially doing as a recruiting power?
Well, you can look at that in 2 different ways. The lost Sacramento State. You can be excited about what Troy Taylor has built at his previous stop because he was the architect of that Sacramento State resurgence, and now you have him at Stanford. You can also realize that you kind of have a program that was impaled over the last few years, and I think if you look at Stanford's early schedule, the USC game was probably more closer to the means than maybe what the Hawaii game may have shown. Sacramento State, not a great loss, but again, Sacramento State is a program that was undefeated until the playoffs last year, and Troy Taylor helped build that. So he knows there needs to be kind of a resurgence in recruiting. Now, I am not at all comparing Elijah Brown to Andrew Luck, but if you go back to Jim Harbaugh's first year at Stanford, things were a little bit slow until they beat USC that season. Then there was reason for optimism. The next year, he signed Andrew Luck. He was part of that first full recruiting class. Well, what does Sacramento State's former head coach, now at Stanford, do to kind of, kickstart things? He goes to Mater Dei to get the quarterback of the #1 team in the country, a guy who's lost one start in almost 4 years as a starting quarterback at Mater Dei. He had big shoes to fill, too. He had to take over for Bryce Young. So what did he do? Won a state championship as a sophomore. There was the COVID season his freshman year, but he went unbeaten. Lost in a fourth quarter lead to St. John Bosco. Otherwise, they would have three-peated. And now they're the #1 team in the state in year 4. With the quarterback situation, one of the things that's hurt Stanford historically, their unwillingness to go into the portal. Well, they've got a quarterback out of the portal this year in Justin Lamson, and he just hasn't been the right fix. You have Ari Patu there, so sometimes you need to go to the youth movement relatively quickly. You look back to what Chris Peterson did at Washington in year 1. He had inherited. He started Jake Browning from the get-go, ended up in 3 New Year's Six Bowls, won 2 Pac-12 titles. Elijah Brown's the kind of quarterback that's going to be able to come in and have a chance to play. So, yeah, I don't see Stanford in danger of losing any of the recruits, especially knowing they're going to the ACC. But Troy Taylor certainly has his work cut out for him there on the farm.
1-2 to start off the season, and they suffered 2 decommitments recently on the recruiting trail. They did find a new home in the SEC where they will begin playing next fall. How do you think that has impacted recruiting when you think about recruits and potentially maybe playing some away games on the opposite coast?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to definitely get used to those frequent flyer miles and those early kickoffs that are going to be, we're going to see in a couple of weeks with a 9 o'clock local kickoff. But hey, that's what you do when you have the program. And it's funny because if you look at Stanford 5 years ago, if conference realignment happened 5 or 6 years ago, they would have been among the first schools to go. And that's what these last 5 years has done to the program. But recruiting is at least showing some signs of life. This year, they have one of the best classes in the country, especially given off the season that they had, where you look at them, they're in the top 5 already for the ACC. And you look, the ACC's got a lot of fits that are like Stanford, with a Duke, with the Wake Forest, schools that are very academically sound programs that, football is great, but it's the academics that you get there. And now Stanford has this national brand. They still have a lot of players in the NFL that were part of the star-studded program that David Shaw had in those early years and that Jim Harbaugh had in his latter years. So I think there's still reason for optimism. If you're a Stanford fan, if you're certainly a Stanford coach, you just know that there needed to be a quick reclamation project. And when you're a school that does not use the portal, like Stanford, a quick reclamation project is kind of an oxymoron. You're going to have to do it the more traditional way.
Yeah, let's move on to Washington now. They are 3-0. They are number 8 in the AP poll. And when you look at the analytics, they're one of the most efficient teams in college football. They have the rating, I think, right now, a guy that's leading the Heisman Trophy conversation, Michael Penix Jr. But this is a program that isn't seeing the results on the recruiting trail. They are one of the top teams in the top 10 nationally that does not have a top 20 recruiting class. Why do you think that commitment surge hasn't happened yet for the Huskies?
Blair, who's the quarterback at the University of Washington right now? Michael Penix, a guy who comes in out of the transfer portal and has immediate success for the Huskies. So what do we think that Washington's going to do in future years? We think they're going to hammer the portal hard. Now, they're still going to recruit. They're still going to bring in high school players, but I don't see them being like a USC or an Oregon where they're going to be bringing in, 80 to 90% of their class in out of the high school ranks, they're going to hit the portal hard. You look at their vaunted receiving core right now with Jalen McMillan, Rome Odunze. Both those guys are gone to the NFL after this year. Jalen Polk, though, he was a player that got out of the portal. He may or may not stay for another year. He may stay to be a featured guy. But losing a guy like Penix, and they've had some depth issues where they've lost some quarterbacks, either losing Lincoln Keyholtz a year ago to Ohio State. Sam Hewer went into the portal. They were able to get Austin Mack to reclassify, but Austin Mack has only been a starting quarterback for 1 year as a high school player. Now you have him in college a year early. He may not be ready to go by the fall of 2024. So I would anticipate, even with Dylan Morris being back, Washington is going to hit the portal at the quarterback position. But they're finding success with players out of the portal. You look at it in their secondary, you look at it their linebacking core, you look at it clearly at the skill position players where their running game. Dylan Johnson, another portal player. They're seeing that you can kind of patchwork guys. And if you look at that offense, you look at what Ryan Grubb as the offensive coordinator, Kalen DeBoer as the head coach have put together. If you're a quarterback in a system that might be holding you back, but you have that talent, all of a sudden, the transfer portal is going to be very attractive, and Washington is going to be very attractive because they'll plug and play, and you're walking into this great system. Also, much like Stanford going to the ACC, Washington now has a home in the Big Ten. So they're going to have a lot of optimism. Now, the big thing with Washington is they suffered a lot of attrition in their 2020 class, in their 2021 class, and even in their 2022 class, which was largely put together by Jimmy Lake. Kalen DeBoer got there, so they had a good 2023 class, but with 2024 not looking big at this point, it's probably going to be another portal every year. And then once you have 2 or 3 years of stability, then I think they start going back to a much more heavier high school recruiting slant to the portal.
Yeah, a lot of recruits, a lot of players looking at Washington as a potential destination to catapult themselves. And obviously, Seattle is proving to be quite the platform. Huff, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
For everything on Stanford, Washington, the rest of the Pac-12 schools that are headed to other conferences, make sure you stay locked in to 247sports.com.
We are coast to coast here on the College Football Recruiting Show, so let's bring it back east. Talk a little Penn State. They had an exceptional 2022 recruiting class headlined by the guy you see throwing passes for him right now, the #1 quarterback in Drew Aller. Then you got the #1 running back in Nicholas Singleton. So when you bring in that 5-star talent and they meet expectations, Smoke, what does that do for the rest of your recruiting class? How much easier does it make that sell?
Well, I know a couple of things. Coach Franklin is sitting there just looking at everybody saying, man, it's great when the plan starts coming together. But for the coaches, it's easy, right? You don't have to sell Penn State anymore. You can look every Saturday and see the product that we're putting on the field, the 5 stars that we have recruited, developed, and identified as 5-star talents are paying true to what we said. And they're becoming household names. And I always tell people there's 3 categories that I always look at for seeing who's checking the boxes when they say they're accruing and recruiting 5-star talent. The first thing that you have to do is identify the talent and make sure that the talent fits your program and fits your culture. Coach Franklin, check box 1, checked, okay? 2, the development of your players. We see the 5 stars are performing as 5 stars. So they're developing their players. And the third and last, they're performing and producing at a high level. Mm-hmm. So what all this is doing is Penn State is taking off, and the other people got to sit back and just watch.
Yeah, you're seeing those dividends pay off in their 2024 class right now. They sit inside the top 10. Of course, they're in front of Michigan, but still behind Ohio State. That's always how they're going to be measured, by those other 2 programs. Not the case on the field though. The Nittany Lions still #3 when it comes to those 2. So if this is the year that they can finally surpass those 2, get the monkey off their back, how could breaking through that barrier potentially help Penn State in recruiting?
Well, now Penn State becomes a national brand.
Yeah.
You can go out now and recruit nationally. And now the top end of your talent now starts pushing those other 2 teams top end. Because when you're building a team, there's 3 tiers to it. Your top end, which are your 22 starters. The middle of your program, which is your backup guys and your guys that are come in, which are considered fringe players. And the bottom of your roster, where the developmental players and young guys are coming in. When you can recruit nationally now and get the top talent at the top, it pushes from the bottom up. Your 3s become now your 2s. Your 2s are now pushing the #1s, and you're trying to eclipse the other guys and become a really good program. And that's where they're becoming a top-tier program. Now, they just got to go on the field and on Saturdays, beat those 2 juggernauts.
Yeah. You heard us talk about in the previous segment just the impact that however you start the season can have on the trail. You've been in these buildings, you know what it's like when you kind of get off to a rocky start. How have you seen that affect the recruiting pitch and just your ability to continue to recruit during the season if maybe you get off to not the best start?
Well, it's troublesome, right? But that's where your leader and your recruiting staff, and if you have a veteran recruiting staff and you have more substance to your program than fluff, you can just say, hey, fellas, this road is a little bit rocky, but guess what? I can settle it because I'm the captain. And the really, really good recruiters, a la what you see down at Alabama and you see at other programs, when they have a 1-loss or 2-loss pro team going in, they're figured out at the end of the day, because at some point it's a process over what's going on the field, which is the performance, because the process is going to outlast the performance at some point.
Yeah, the best ones do not panic,
No.
and they continue to pitch what they're pitching to their team. It's a long season,
They
right?
typically say never blink or flinch when somebody yells boo.
Exactly. That's Smoke Dixon, our new college football analyst. So excited to have you on the show today. Thanks, Smoke.
Appreciate you.
You know it. Been on top for so long. Yeah, you know it. Been on top for so long.
It is time now to hit on our top 5 plays from the weekend that was. Let's head to Alabama for number 5. Vestavia Hills High taking on Hoover High. We got 9 minutes left in the second quarter. This is a quarterback. John Paul Head just bulldozes his way into the end zone. Blair, I don't want to stereotype, but you don't normally see that from quarterbacks.
The new college football video game is coming out soon. This dude is sure to wear out the right joystick. Wow.
Yeah, that hurts. We're going to stick in the state of Alabama. Foley High versus Baker High. Auburn commit Perry Thompson. We named him a 5-star for a reason. This catch is that reason. Full extension in the corner of the end zone. Baker ended up winning it 51-41. But Blair, if I'm an Auburn fan watching this and he's committed to my team, I'm pretty psyched.
Incredible. He loses his helmet in the process, but not possession. What a play.
Who needs a helmet? Let's go to Wisconsin for number 3. Two Rivers running back Chase Mathias just dishing out stiff arm after stiff arm on this run, but it's the hit to my man number 2. Ow, that caps off this violent run. I mean, who angered this guy?
I counted 5 failed defenders, and it would have been more if Chase had more real estate to work with.
Yeah, that's gonna hurt for a while.
And then he
you
points at the
watch
camera.
that.
Look at him point at the camera right here.
Oh, he knows exactly what he just did. Let's go to number 2, Ruston High School out of Louisiana taking on Cabot High. Ruston throwing from their own end zone, but my man Ahmad Hudson with just an incredible one-handed snag. Blair, he is from the 2027 class. This is a 14-year-old freshman. He understandably already has an offer in from LSU, but I'm going to need to see some ID. I'm not believing he's 14.
My favorite part was all the onlookers standing on knowing they were about to see something crazy.
Yeah, and they did. Our top play of the weekend, let's head to Hawaii. Number 3, St. John Bosco visiting the number 1 team in the state, Kahuku. Aiden Manitai just jumps the route. He's taken it all the way to the house, 53 yards. That was the difference in Kahuku's massive upset of St. John Bosco, 30-23. Blair, put it into perspective for us. How big a win is this?
Kahuku became the first public school to beat either Bosco or Mater Dei since 2015. That means there's a party on the North Shore.
Certainly a party on the North Shore. We got an honorable mention here in Texas. Live Oak Classical School taking on Gordon High School. An extra point. We're going to need to see that again because you're not going to believe what happened. It goes through the uprights, then through the window of a passing car. So the passenger just snags it. I'm sure our scouting team is working on a new recruiting profile. How impressive was that? That doesn't happen.
I had to watch it 6-7 times to just see what was happening, and yeah, that's crazy. I'm curious how many more times he'd have to do that to get it again. That's once in a lifetime.
Never again. We like to highlight big football plays. That one not really football necessarily, but we had to show it because it was insane. If you want more awesome plays like that, check out our friends at Max Preps. They'll get you covered on all things high school football all season long.
2 to 4 years. I'll be committed to the University of Michigan.
I'd like to commit to the University of Notre Dame.
of the weekend is the #1 quarterback in the 2025 class, a guy you've heard us mention many a time, Bryce Underwood. The 5-star out of Michigan led his number 22 Belleville team to a 53-0 win over Dearborn. Underwood went 15 of 15, that's all of them, for nearly 300 yards and 5 total touchdowns. The top-ranked team in the state is now 4-0. Blair, he then made the trip to visit Coach Prime after that performance. We talked about that earlier in the show. With numbers like that, there's no surprise he's among the most highly pursued prospects in this class. But how big of a game changer could this guy be wherever he ends up?
A big-time playmaker. He's got a huge arm. He's accurate. He's got tremendous touchdown field. He throws a really nice deep ball. He can use his legs to escape pressure, and then he makes things happen in the open field. But above all, Emily, he's a winner. He has captured consecutive Michigan Division I state titles. He was the Freshman of the Year in 2021, according to Max Preps. And then he followed that up by being the National Sophomore in the Year in 2022. And now he's the Recruit of the Weekend here on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Show in 2023. The honors just keep stacking up for Mr. Bryce Underwood.
We're going to need a bigger graphic. He still has more high school football left to play. I was talking in studio here with Smoke Dixon, who was on a little bit earlier, and he said that we need to check out his basketball highlights. Apparently he's got a mean dunk as well, so we got to get that on the show a little bit later. But he's doing enough to impress us on the football field for sure. Let's answer some of your viewer questions. Our first one comes from Tyler C. Blair, he asks, was Mizzou's win over Kansas State bigger for recruiting or saving Coach Drink's job?
I think it was bigger for recruiting because the job saving could happen in the SEC play, right? There's still a lot of opportunities there. But for recruiting, I think this catapults them. It gives them a little bit of momentum, and it's always important to rile up the fan base, but also bring in some recruits and say, hey, look, this is what we're building, this is what we're doing. And to win that game in the manner that they did, to show that this program is on the right path. They've been getting some big time recruiting wins, right? The Williams, Winery, and getting Luther Burton a couple years ago. He's been making plays on Saturdays. I think Missouri has done a great job of landing recruits and then allowing them to produce at the college level. And obviously that was a huge thing for them on Saturday when they upset K-State.
Certainly was a big statement. This next one comes from H. Glenn. Who do you think would be a good replacement for Mel Tucker at Michigan State?
Well, the one name that has already been thrown out by our insiders over at Spartan Tailgate, the Michigan State side on the 24/7 Sports Network, on the hot board is Jonathan Smith, and he has Oregon State off to a 3-0 start. The Oregon State Beavers, unfortunately, on the outside looking in from a Power 5 standpoint. So that would be, I think, a very natural, organic fit if they were able to target Jonathan Smith and what he's been able to do in Corvallis and potentially turn that program around in East Lansing.
All right, that's going to do it for our show today. Hit the like button on your way out and make sure that you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.